If ever there were a big idea, I think providing equitable and abundant affordable housing would be one. Today we're going to explore the context, the application and the potential of the Affordable Housing Ordinance. Our moderator today is Brian Eisenberg. He's the Deputy Commissioner of Housing Development at the City's Department of Housing. Brian's work focuses on revitalising troubled neighbourhoods and increasing affordable housing opportunities. The Housing Development Division allocates over $100 million per year to create and preserve affordable housing. So I'll turn it over to Brian now.
Good afternoon. We'll start out with a little bit of introductions. You've heard introductions to myself, but each of these players have had some different involvement in developing affordable housing and also in what we consider to be the ARO. ARO by no means is our only tool for affordable housing, and in the context of everything we do, it's a minuscule tool. Very important to a lot of developers that pay in, and when we look at it on a budget perspective, it's about 4% of my budget, so it's not a huge deal. But it's important for everybody to understand what it is, what it can accomplish, and what else we really want to do with things. So we have a great panel today. We have the Honorable Alderman Walton Burnett. If you wouldn't mind spending a few minutes just after you get over everything. We also have Representative David Block from Evergreen and Mr. Michael Drew from Structured Development. So we're hoping for a nice balanced perspective, government, private, nonprofit, or affordable developer. So just to start everything out as a way of providing context and introducing yourselves, please give a brief overview of your connection to ARO and affordable housing, and starting with Alderman.
Thank you very much. Again, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alderman Walton Burnett. First of all, I'm very flattered and honored to be here today, to be on the panel with these two esteemed gentlemen here. So, myself and at that time, Alderman Tony Prentwinkle, and before she retired, right before she retired, Alderman Helen Schiller, worked with a lot of non-for-profit organizations, affordable housing organizations throughout the city of Chicago, and a couple of law firms to come up with the ARO ordinance, and worked in coordination with the city of Chicago after standing up to Mayor Daley for several years before finally the mayor gave in and came around to supporting us on the ARO. So that's how I'm connected. And we stood up to Mayor Daley. We actually had a couple of fights, and I'm still alive, man. Y'all laughing, but I kind of felt funny back then. I was a little worried back then. And then since that time, the ARO has gone through a few more renditions, and one that I put in my ward with a pilot program to increase the amount of affordable housing.
Thank you, Alderman. I'm David Block. I'm the Director of Development for Evergreen Real Estate Group. We are primarily, but not exclusively, an affordable housing developer based here in Chicago. And so we have a few projects under construction in the city right now. We are working with the city, with the Chicago Housing Authority, with IDA and others on developing two of the three pretty amazing mixed library affordable housing projects. My colleagues over at the other table are developing the third one. So we're doing the two projects up in Westridge and in Old Irving Park. And those have been wonderful public-private partnerships, very complicated, very intense projects. We also have a urban infill project under construction in Albany Park. And currently we are working on getting our final financing together to redevelop the old Ravenswood Hospital into a combined independent living and support facility. So we're trying to stay busy. One of the things that I most appreciate about the ARO is that it is potentially a significant new revenue stream for producing affordable housing. So as an affordable housing developer, obviously that is very helpful to the work we do. We've been talking to a number of market rate developers, including a couple of folks in this room, about how we can join forces to figure out how we use these, how we leverage the tools that we use in our business, tax credits and other things, to help make this program really work. So we're looking forward to continuing those conversations.
Thank you. So I'm I guess I fall into the market rate development category. Structured has done most of its development in and around the Clybourne corridor, and most of that in the 27th Ward. Largest project being the new city redevelopment at Clybourne and Halsted. Our involvement with the ARO dates back to the early days of that development and commitments that we've made to the aldermen, even before there was an ARO ordinance in place. And Walter has always been consistent in his desire to have units built that are affordable and available for a larger group than would normally fall within the market rate. So he's a little bit, when he called me esteemed, I should point out that he now, I believe, is fourth in seniority in the city council, and he's been elected, I don't know how many times, Walter, I've lost track, but you must. I don't have to keep track, right? But obviously he's been doing something right, he's been consistent, and he was one of the sponsors for the pilot ordinance, which increased the percentage of affordable housing and changed some of the locations. But we are currently working on a project within that pilot zone to provide in excess of 70 affordable units. And to David's point, we're using some of the funds available from the ARO to help offset the costs. So that is happening, as you mentioned.
So ARO is basically our inclusionary zoning policy. And the intent of ARO, largely across many cities, I mean, it's not unique to Chicago by any means. Thousands of cities across the country have inclusionary zoning policies. But the policies, people generally agree, is one of desegregation. How do we correct a lot of the imbalance of history, and how do we ensure that new development is still equitable and balanced? And so it's not necessarily an end-all, overall affordable housing solution tool. It's one piece of many puzzles. So, David, if you wouldn't mind, what are some of the tools that you use to develop affordable housing?
So the basic tool for affordable housing development is the low-income housing tax credit, or LIHTC. It's, especially in these kinds of political times that we're in, it's a terrible name because it immediately puts folks who may be skeptical of what these projects are on the defensive about, well, you know, I've had plenty of meetings that are unfortunately increasingly coming to Chicago where, you know, we don't want those people, whoever those people are, living in my neighborhood. But regardless of the name of the tool, it is a very powerful economic driver. There are two flavors of tax credit, the competitive 9% credit and the non-competitive 4% credit. And so we try to use both of them depending on the circumstance. You know, there are different nuances associated with both of them. So for example, the two library projects in Chicago are using the competitive credit, and our Albany Park project is using the non-competitive credit. It provides a lot of money. It's essentially equity that does not need to be repaid to a bank. And so it is really the driver that helps make almost all new construction affordable housing projects move forward these days. With that, you need to layer on, in some cases, 2 or 3 or 8 additional sources of funds. You know, private debt, first mortgage debt, is obviously one potential source of that. We do a lot of work with the Chicago Housing Authority, and so CHA has a set of resources available, both on the capital side and on the operating side. So essentially to help make the monthly rent that a tenant pays affordable. Probably heard the term Section 8 or project-based vouchers. That's the fundamental tool. So a tenant who only has $1,000 a month in income pays $300 a month in rent, 30% of your income. And then on top of that, there's a whole alphabet soup of other kinds of resources from the Federal Home Loan Bank. We like doing historic adaptive reuse projects, so there are historic tax credits that are available that you can twin with these. The New Markets tax credit that many of you have used is not really a tool for housing, but if you're doing a mixed-use development, you can actually combine these things if you have clever attorneys and a large enough legal budget. You know, those are sort of the basic tools that make this business go. And part of what I find personally satisfying is the art of putting each deal together. Each deal is a little different, and how you have to do these things.
So for structure, you said you're working on an ARO transaction now. What are some of the tools that typically exist for private market developers to develop affordably, if any, frankly?
If any, that's a good question. So what David just described is what I call the traditional method of delivering affordable. It's since 1987, when the LIHTCs were instituted, I think there's been about 2 million units delivered. But what we find, and I suspect, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that what has happened over time is that the soft cost of delivering an affordable unit has made it anything but affordable. There seems to be a disincentive to manage the cost because the tax credits are a percentage of the cost. The developer's fee is a percentage of the cost. And it appears as if all of these costs are accepted by the agencies, whether it's IDA or CHA or any of the funding agencies, without a lot of pressure to keep control of costs that a market rate developer would be very focused on. So in answer to your question, what we're working on is a 70-unit project within the pilot zone as a means of complying with the ARO requirement, mainly for the off-site units, the additional units. And the only reason that it works for us is because of the mandated fee, the ARO fee for off-site development, which in this case for downtown projects is about $180,000 per unit. We use that as equity, as a reimbursement of our equity, but we're able to deliver a standard 3 or 4 story walk-up 2 and 3 bedroom unit for a cost of approximately $270,000. I found that the typical CHA unit or affordable unit is somewhere north of $380,000 to $450,000, often with the land being either donated or city land or no cost land. And that's primarily because you've got $100,000 to $125,000 in soft costs that are mandated costs by the federal government, bond underwriting, tax attorneys, legal work, stuff that just is kind of like any federal program has built over time. And it really is a misnomer to call it affordable because the construction costs of these things, the overall costs, are anything but.
Yeah. So there seems to be a great play between then private market developers and affordable developers. So can you talk to maybe how, what role does ARO play in helping us solve some of these affordable housing issues?
Well, one, I appreciate Mike. I mean, I hear all these things when he comes to meet me. From him and also from other developers. But, one of the, when developers come to me, and it depends on where your area is, in our area, when we started affordable housing, Cabrini Green was Cabrini Green, West Loop was Skid Row, the near west side was the near west side, and we were pushing for affordable housing back then. Since that time, values have gone up tremendously, right? So now, when guys come to us, we're able to say, okay, you can either build the affordable housing in that condo building where you're selling the units for $1.2 million, or you could build some affordable housing off-site for a couple of $100,000 or $300,000, So, I mean, it's like, to me, the affordable housing is a deal. That's how I look at it. It's a deal to build affordable housing. It's not that it costs a lot, but also at the same time, so we try to encourage affordable housing. And one of the conversations that I always have with planning is right now all of these developers are trying, especially the commercial developers, are trying to capture the millennials, right? Every millennial I talk to want an affordable unit. I don't know of any millennials who don't want an affordable unit, right? And I tell planning, we need to encourage the commercial developers to get involved in the affordable housing too, because if they want to build to attract millennials to come to the city to work, we need to get them an affordable place to stay. And if we don't have an affordable place to stay, we're not as competitive as other cities are in getting these millennials to bring that economy, that new emerging economy, here to the city of Chicago. Also, when he mentioned CHA, when we put CHA in affordable housing, and use them as part of the ARO, actually CHA puts the bill. They use the RAD program, and they pretty much pay the rent. You know, back in the day when the market got real bad, and I was encouraging guys to do affordable housing in CHA, they only wanted to do CHA, right? Because CHA paid the rent. And sometimes CHA will actually buy the condo units from them at a certain rate. So we ended up getting more CHA than we did affordable housing. So I think it's very important that we leverage these things to try to make the city more affordable. I'm getting accused now. I was at a meeting last night. The lady beat me up because she said the affordable housing is not affordable, right? So I'm getting beat up now because people are saying it's not as affordable. I was at a meeting last week for a Thor project on Fulton and Halsted, and the residents over there was like, where's the affordable housing? We can't afford to live here anymore in the West Loop. Now those same people, granted, were the same people who didn't want affordable housing years ago. But now they find that their neighborhood, the rents are going from $3.50 a square feet to $4 a square feet. And they can't afford to live there. If we want to have a balanced society, we need to find a way to do some affordable housing. Now, granted, you know, from what I understand in New York and California, they do some things with the taxes, get some type of property tax credits for folks who deal with affordable housing. Maybe we need to do those things. If we want to compete with those two cities, maybe we need to do some of those things to make it happen. But you know, that's bigger than the city council. That goes to the state and some other folks, but maybe those are some things that we need to do. But in order to keep our economy going and keep our city competitive, we have to have affordable housing, or you're not going to keep these kids here. You know, my son lives in New York right now. He works for Goldman Sachs. Almost half his salary goes toward rent, you know? And so he's like, if I came to Chicago, man, I'd be able to keep all this money, right? I mean, seriously. And if our rents keep going the way that it's going, we're going to have young people saying, if I move over here, I can keep most of my money instead of paying it in rent. And they won't be working here, and we won't have the economy to be able to keep this city going. So it's a bigger picture. So everybody needs to buy into the affordable housing picture, not just the developers that build residential development, but it's very, very important for the commercial developers if you all want to keep your projects going. So, but you know, I'm going to sell you all on this all day.
So the ARO program, the way it works in the city, and this is an evolving program. We started this in 2007, we made some changes in 15, made some changes in 17, made some changes in 19. The idea is that as we learn new things, that have greater ideas come in, we understand what works better, we try to make that work better. So we want to listen to what's out there. But right now, we basically cut the pie into 3 different options. You can develop units on-site, you can develop units off-site, you can pay a fee. It's not really an either-or situation. It's a combination of things. It depends on where you're at and what you're doing. But there's constantly a lot of criticism about it. Should it be on-site? Should it be off-site? Undeveloped land throughout the city, how do we develop those lands? So the pilot programs that we started in basically took in-new fee off the table. So maybe, Alderman, if you could talk a little bit about the pilot programs and how it got us to where we're at now.
So we put in a pilot program because, you know, some developers will make a deal to do some affordable housing on site, And then because of the law, it said that they can buy out. So once they build their buildings, they end up buying out, right? And then they get on my blacklist and they can't build in my ward anymore, right? But that's just a message to you guys. But so what we did, so actually planning and everyone was trying to handle me, so to speak, because I would ask for more than 10% all the time, right? And over in the Cabrini Green area, I would ask for 10% CHA and 10% affordable, and we was getting it. And planning was like, you know, that's not our policy, so on and so forth. So to make me legal, they put in a pilot program, right? So we put in a pilot program to ask for 20% affordable, and you can do CHA and or affordable housing. But the other thing that we put in there is that you cannot buy out. There's no more buying out. Which, of course, planning really didn't want to do because they like the in lieu fees. They like the money to be able to use it with other projects. And also because of the fact that we have more development going on than anyone else in the city. But we are trying to get more affordable housing built in our ward. And so basically that's where we are with the pilot program right now. You can't buy out in most of our area to the west. And most of our area to the east is 20%. When you get west in our ward, we made it 15%. One of the reasons why we made it 15% is because we have a lot of affordable housing west. We need more mixed income housing, so we made it 15%. So, you know, my thing is I'm not just pro affordable housing, I'm pro mixed income housing throughout my ward and throughout the city of Chicago.
So for structure, in addition to building on site though, what are some of the ways that we can make building offsite a little bit easier or better?
Well, let me address, first of all, say that while Walter is right, I come to his office and I bring my issues and we have a good discussion. One time when we were working on a project, I came in with an idea and Walter listened politely and he looked at me after I was finished and he said, "Why don't you go home and pray on that?" It was a nice way of shutting me down. But as I'm a deacon in my church, I prayed on and I came to the right answer. So, but I continue to question the inclusionary part of the arrow, namely to build on site. Because I'd like to point out today's market rate units, today's development looks something like this. 70% of the units are smaller than 1 bedrooms. The average studios are about 500 to 550 square feet. They rents are, as Walter says, somewhere between $3.50 to $4 a square foot. And the average amenity space in today's market rate multifamily units is almost 40,000 feet. That includes golf simulators, media rooms, cyber cafes, upscale fitness areas, swimming pools, all the amenities, because there's been an amenity war with between the competing units, and that's what today's millennials want in terms of what they're looking at. I question whether public policy is well served by saying that we should make that unit with all those amenities affordable to someone. If the cost of a unit like that is $350,000, and as I said, we can build a 2 or 3 bedroom, walk up 3 or 4 story, just like have been built all over the city over decades and decades, and we can deliver it for that. That's to me a much greater benefit than having a millennial who rightly complains that he'd like to have a cheaper, affordable rent, but he wants access to all these amenities that have to be paid for over the, either through rent or the cost of things. So that's my issue with on-site units.
So David, what about the amenities that you would put in your building? How would that be built?
So, generally, since we're not putting dog parks or other sorts of things in our buildings, but there are some basic amenities that go into affordable buildings. But generally, the approach that we have taken is, since these projects are so complicated to put together in the first place, why not look for something extra? Which is why we were so gratified when the CHA came to us, selected us for these two library projects, because that, using you've got the same lawyers who are working on it. It doesn't add anything to the budget to have lawyers working on a lease between the building and the city to get a library in there. It doesn't add anything to have to deal with the kinds of compliance issues that we have to deal with if you're building a public facility or a retail facility. And so the kinds of amenities that I think go very well with affordable housing are more public amenities. So the libraries are a good example of that. The other examples, I think, are more retail developments. So as part of the Grove Park redevelopment down in Woodlawn, they just got their first new grocery store at 63rd and Cottage Grove in many years. A few years ago, I worked on a project in the 4th Ward called the Shops and Lofts, which had, interestingly, 40,000 square feet of grocery store. And so that was, again, the first new grocery store that had been part of that community in about 50 years. And that was built, again, with the structural tools that we have to help build affordable housing. And it was mixed income housing. So it wasn't just CHA housing, or it wasn't just tax credit housing. There was a significant market mix there. People weren't paying $4 a square foot, but on Cottage and 47th, they were paying $1.50, close to $2 a square foot, and it was a pretty good rent at that time for that community. So I think using the tools and kind of maximizing the available public amenities, whether they're retail or public facilities such as libraries, is one way to do this. And I guess I would push back a little bit on the cost issue. I mean, I have a whole hour-long PowerPoint that I have offered to share. No one's taken me up on why affordable housing costs so much money. But I think some of that is not just the inertia of red tape. Some of it, there really is some public benefit to it. We can argue about whether the Davis-Bacon Act actually represents a public benefit, but at the end of the day, Davis-Bacon, which, most development in Chicago is already paying union wages, but Davis-Bacon just ensures that everyone who is working on that site is actually getting paid the wages and the benefits that they are supposed to be receiving. So it's a worker protection element to it. We can argue about whether that's worth the additional amount of money that it costs to do it, but it's those kinds of things that drive the cost of affordable housing compared to market rate housing that doesn't have those requirements.
But I think that's only if you're working with a public entity like CHA, right? If you're a private developer and you're going to do ARO, you don't have to, you do whatever you have to do in reference to that. Most large developers do that, so.
No, that's great. So I want to make sure we have time for some questions from the audience. So I'm kind of give one little softball wrap up. But to put this in context, if we look at the DePaul Institute of Housing Studies, they say we have 120,000 unit shortage of affordable housing in the city. If we look at the production of ARO alone, we got about 1,500 units. So ARO is not a problem. My division develops about 1,200 units a year. That's still an issue. So we got a big gap to fill here. So in terms of for structures, what are some of the incentives needed to encourage developers to build more units on site?
In a brief answer, any way that we can make the costs, excuse me, neutral. If it's a tax abatement policy that offsets the additional cost of building these units and renting them for a third of market to keep them affordable, then that's certainly an avenue. You remove that burden, which right now it's a bit punitive. Walter's point about the commercial development sharing in it is a good point. Why shouldn't Google and McDonald's that are bringing, there's been 20,000 jobs come to the central business district, new jobs. Why should a market rate multifamily developer bear the burden of providing the housing, affordable housing for them? It should be, I'm not an advocate for increasing taxes, but it should be spread within the real estate community, because as Walter says, they're bringing the jobs, 20,000 jobs, that's driving the demand for housing. It's going to increase rents without production of units. But that's the easy answer, is a comprehensive real estate tax program, which says either the affordable unit is abated for the life of the commitment, or the units that are market rate units within the building that it contains affordable have a reduced real estate tax, something to offset that cost and incentivize developers to build affordable. I think that will make a significant difference.
Great, thank you for that. So David, what kind of tools would be needed for you to help develop more affordable housing? I mean, recognizing we have diminishing resources, federal funding is coming in lower, city funding is coming in lower. What are some additional tool ideas you might have?
Well, again, it's maybe finding new ways to use existing tools. We haven't talked about one of the new tools that's now in the federal toolkit, which is these federal opportunity zones. Opportunity zones are not really intended for affordable housing development. They don't play well with LIHTC. Generally, LIHTC developers don't have any use for the tax benefits that go along with that, because they're getting a different set of tax benefits when they're purchasing the low-income housing tax credits. But again, back to my point about trying to get the most bang for our buck, we are exploring, actually up in Milwaukee, the use of opportunity zone funds to help finance a commercial component of a mixed-use, mixed-income deal, so that you basically are sharing or spreading some of the cost of development to the commercial side, using opportunity zone funds where appropriate, to essentially help take the cost of the foundation and the architectural design work and everything else to help generate additional affordable housing. So finding more ways to use new tools together in maybe ways that hadn't originally been thought of, I think is always a good strategy.
So Alderman, you've been a great champion of affordable housing and brought some great change to the ARO. What are some kind of tools or programs you'd like to see move into this next administration?
Well, they both mentioned some of the things. I know his perspectives come from an affordable housing developer. When I look at affordable housing, and when these guys come to me to talk about a development, they always come to the table talking about how much they can make and how much they're going to lose, right? And I'm always saying, well, right now you have nothing. This is how much you're going to make, right? So it's like you're going from up to down. I'm going from down to up, right? It's like two different things, So it's like we got two different perspectives, and so a lot of times, like in our ward, we had to get density. Putting density up is getting harder and harder, right? Even the affordable housing people be going, like, for instance, on Fulton, and a lot of folks don't know, but on Fulton and Halsted, where I just had a community meeting that was one of my first ARO buildings right there. A lot of people don't know that that's a lot of affordable housing is in that building, right on Fulton and Halsted and West Loop. And a lot of those folks came to the community meeting to go against a building that's going to block their view, right? And I had to remind them in the meeting, you all got an affordable unit over there, and before your building was built, the building behind you had a view, But so it's always a challenge. But I think that we need to consider the fact a lot of folks are afraid of affordable housing, but affordable housing if you look at how much an affordable unit, if it's 60% of median income for a studio apartment, last night I got beat up because they say it's not affordable enough. A studio apartment costs you $850 a month for a studio apartment. And some folks say that's not affordable enough, that we should do more. A lady was just jacking me up last night about this. I think we all got to buy into this process. I think, and what I tell developers, since this mayor been in, and he's my friend, but since he's been in, it's funny how the developers come and cry to you about the affordable housing, but they don't cry when he say, okay, you got to pay this opportunity fund fee, right? All these guys paying millions of dollars in opportunity fund fee. I'm like, hey man, my affordable housing was in first. Cry about the opportunity fund fee. Don't cry about the affordable housing, how much the affordable housing going to cost you. And then now in the industrial areas where we rezone the property, now they have an industrial fee, right? So, everybody want to cry about the affordable housing, but they don't want to say anything about the other fees. I remember when we first put in affordable housing, and when we was first fighting for the affordable housing, the city was trying to make everybody do lava rocks and dog walks, right? And I was like, lava rocks and dog walks in front of your place and putting the trees in front of your place is more important than human beings having an affordable place to live. That just don't jive with me. And so I think we just need to put things in perspective, and maybe we need to, instead of doing the opportunity fund, say, okay, we'll let you bypass on the opportunity fund if you do more affordable housing. Or maybe we let you get past this industrial fee if you do affordable housing. Maybe we have to give up something in the city part in order to get these guys to do more to make it balanced. But I think it's the affordable housing issue is a necessary evil for us here in the city in order to help keep people in the city.
Oh, that's great. Thank you to our panelists. I'd like to open it up now for questions from the audience. 5 minutes.
Questions? You guys did good.
Thank you. So one of the things you referenced was about the proportion of studio or one-bedroom apartments. Who is responsible, or who is kind of doing that data mine to figure out, what is the desired rate of bedroom count for affordable units relative to the market rate stuff that's actually being built?
The ARO requires that you match for your percentage on site, that you match the mix that's in the building. So for instance, if you have 70% one bedrooms or studios, you would be required, if you're providing 10%, you would be required to match.
So it is matching, but that's my point, is that if the market sells for, if the demand is for these one bedrooms for the market, what is the actual, people who genuinely need affordable housing in the city? Is there a gap between the sort of census of the people needing housing versus the market rate that's being built and is selling?
My understanding is that there is a huge gap on what's called family affordable housing, 2 and 3 bedrooms. And that is because the ARO program is tied to the production of market rate units. Whether it's 10%, 15%, or 20%, it doesn't matter. If the market rate units don't get built, 10% is zero, and it's still zero. The market rate units that are being built are necessarily smaller because the square foot rent price is so much higher. And people are getting used to renting smaller places. Today's millennials, they can pick up their stuff and move in half an hour, and they're on to the next one. But since the ARO is tied to market rate, it necessarily responds to the size of those units. I think that's a huge failing of the program, And in fact, I believe it's tied to the cost of the production of these units and the amenities associated with them.
So as far as the sizes go, myself and Alderman Jason Irving, who has part of the West Loop with me, he had a development going on where he wanted them to build off-site, and it was an all-studio building. But the funny thing was that what it cost to build the studio in the building in the West Loop, he could have built a 2-flat, right, on the west side. So he was trying to introduce an ordinance to say that it don't have to be the same size if you build it off-site. We're trying to say that you can build a unit for the same price, right? That it would cost you to build a unit there. So we're still working on that. He had it written where, you know, he was gonna like allow the developer the lawyer for the developer talked him into writing the ordinance to say that, you know, if he built 2 studios here, he can account for a 2-bedroom over there. And I was like, no, I'm not signing none of that, right? It needs to be dollar for dollar, right? It needs to be dollar for dollar. So if it costs you $400,000 or $300,000 to build that unit in that building, you can take that $300,000, $400,000 and build a 2-flat on the west side in a lot. And then one of the things that we are changing on in the city, and we're looking at, one, we need to expand the radius where you can build off-site, right? And two, one, we need to change the radius where you can build off-site. And two, wow, I just lost that train of thought. Two, we need to, I forgot. I'm sorry.
Well, to pick up where the Alderman's at, so under our new Pilsen Real Village pilot, we do create an incentive to build family-sized units. And so it's an evolving process, and so we definitely need to listen.
But Walter, one comment on that. When you talk about expanding the radius, Lori Lightfoot's position is to cut it in half. And I don't understand how that leads to, I believe the stated goal is to provide more affordable units by restricting the land available from what they call the triggering property. She wants to make it a mile. Lincoln Yards has a 3-mile radius. Some other the pilot zones, for instance, are probably a third of that or less, but she wants to make it less. And I don't think that's consistent with producing units. And I believe that it might be more related to gentrification and that being addressed under the ordinance as well.
So actually, that's a north side thing. No, I'm serious. Because when we had this big fight when we were working with the advocates from the north side, us on the west side wanted to build off-site on the west side, right? From my properties on the north side, we can leverage it and have some stuff built on the west side. And so they fought to get the radius shorter. Because the north siders are concerned because they're so concentrated, they're concerned about the gentrification going on the north side. They want to make folks build right there. They don't want them to have the opportunity to go further west. So that's a north side versus south side and west side argument, right? Our thing is if we get more housing built on the west side, how they say it, if you get more housing built on the west side, you fill in more vacant lots, you get the density, diversity of incomes, you get more businesses, more housing, the rising tide raise all, and we have more people paying taxes, right? So that's a north. So and most of the affordable housing advocates, quiet as this kept, come from the north side. So that's where that debate comes in at. But I'm for housing being built. I don't want a radius in my ward. I want to be able to build all over my ward to make, do the Robin Hood thing, get the east side to build on the west side.
One more question?
Alderman, are there any issues related to affordable housing that deals with transit-oriented development?
No, not at all. I think close to the L stops, we need to increase affordable housing. for one. A lot of folks are, because we have the transit-oriented development, folks have less cars, you can build smaller units, you can build more affordable housing. I think they work hand in hand. And quite as it's kept, like, you know, in some buildings where I encourage affordable housing at, sometimes we work with the developers. Before we came out with the transit-oriented development, we would allow those affordable developers to not have to build parking for the affordable units, because in most cases, the developers were selling the parking anyway, right? And how you gonna get a guy, if they can't afford the apartment, then they gonna buy a parking space too, they couldn't afford the parking, so we allowed them to get a break on that, so that kind of worked hand in hand.
Thank you very much. Round of applause for our panel.